Don't forget, ko-fi.com/stopwritingalone is a real simple way to show your support for what's going on here week after week. Hi everyone, this is Nicole Rivera and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast for writers who are looking for their writing community. I know you want to find readers for your work, but I think your first step is to connect with other writers. That's what we're going to do here in the Stop Writing Alone podcast. We'll do writing prompts and other writing group activities, discover online writing communities, learn how to find local writing groups, or how to make your own. Join us as we explore, learn, and write. This week's episode of Stop Writing Alone is sponsored by the Creative Ways podcast. Host and long-term designer Emma Isaac's podcast features inspiring conversations with successful photographers, musicians, fashion designers, and more, who generously share tactical advice to motivate and educate creatives to stay on the path. Find it where you listen to your podcast, and be sure to visit her website for a fun freebie at emmaisaacs.co.uk. And you can find that link in the show notes for today's episode. Hi, this is Nicole Rivera, and you're listening to the Stop Writing Alone podcast. Week 2 of NaNoWriMo is notoriously the hard week for me. I think I even discussed this last week in the podcast, but this week I want to talk to you about NaNoWriMo Blocks, because this is the week where I feel like they all come crashing in, and if you can meet those challenges head on when they come up, then you will know how to deal with them in week 3, in week 4, and so on and so forth as you move on in your writing career. I consider our writing blocks to be in 3 different categories, and 2 of the categories pretty much overlap. So there are obviously blocks that come up in story, there are blocks that come up as a result of our personal lives, and there are blocks that come up as a result of our working lives. I'm sure there's plenty of other things that can come into the way of us getting our writing done, but these are the 3 biggies that come up over and over again for many different writers, and I wanted to address those 3 right now, quick and easy, with very sort of general advice on them, because I do believe every single one of these things could be dealt with on a personal one-to-one sort of conversation of digging in deeper as to where your block is coming from. But I think this type of advice can sort of be broad strokes enough that perhaps you can see yourself in it and find your way out. So I'm going to start with story. And the thing is, with story, I think there's I think when we talk about writing block, a lot of times people discuss it as if it's this mystical sort of power that comes over you and there's nothing that can be done about it. Like, oh, I'm in a block and that's that. And in that sense, I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe that there is this magical entity that's just stealing your ability to write. I do believe that if we are feeling blocked, there is something behind it. And if we are brave enough to sort of face it and explore it, then we can get through it. So in story, I think there's plenty of different ways that this can come at you. But right now, in a NaNoWriMo type of writing, where you are just like muscling through and trying to get to the next thing, and just get as many words as possible, there's the character or idea feeling weak, and you sort of get blocked because you're like, this idea isn't good enough. This character is not really doing anything or feeling strong enough. And then there's the block that's like, what next? I wrote all the things that were in my head, and I literally don't know what to write next. So first, let's talk about the weak, either idea or character. When that comes up, I want you to look for the thing that you've written that popped out at you, the thing that was working, the thing that did feel like it was powerful on the page or powerful when it came to you. So this could come to when you first came up with the idea. Why did you think this was a great idea to write about? A lot of times when we get into the writing of our work, we forget about the excitement of why this idea felt great. It starts to feel like this is the worst idea ever. But at one point, maybe it was just a week ago, or maybe it was months ago or years ago, this idea came to you and you said, that would be a cool story. That would be a really, really great idea. I should write that. You have got to revisit that and remember why you were excited about it. And don't be defeatist about this, I should say. And don't say, I don't know, I can't remember. There's something in you that knows, and it's just your internal, either lack of confidence or overwhelm for where you're at right now that's not allowing you to see it. But you know that you were excited about this idea, and you can't tell me, which is sometimes a defense mechanism. We say, well, I was just an idiot when I thought that. Because that's not true. You and I both know that. You were of full sound mind and body when you thought it was a good idea. Trust that person and allow yourself to see that even if in this current iteration of your drafting, maybe you've lost your way a little bit, and maybe what you are writing right now isn't delivering on the coolness of what you thought this idea was in the first place, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the idea, the character, the story still has all of its potential. So tap into that and keep moving forward, trying to drive yourself back to the point where that excitement comes back to the page. That's remembering the fire that was in you. There's a quote, and I'm going to misquote it, but it's basically that says, if you're burned out on anything, there must have at one point been a fire that burned. So that is the idea that you have, the character that you have. These were exciting things. They still are. And again, you may have lost your way, but you can find your way back. So try to tap into the thing that was exciting about it and ask yourself, how can I bring that back to this character? Now, some people will argue that you could go back and rewrite it into everything. I say in NaNoWriMo, move forward. Try to weave it in as much as you can as you move forward. And then when you come back for revision, whether it's in January or later, maybe you do revisions in December, but I give myself a month off. Whenever you come back to do revision, then you can go back and weave it in all the way through. The other thing that is really powerful, particularly if your character is feeling very passive, is to dig deeper on what their why is. What is their real reason for being in this story? Why are you telling their story? And what is the arc that you want them to follow along? Where are they beginning? Where are they ending? What kind of change do they want to go through? And what is their why? What is their reason for being here? And the more that you can underscore that and have it show up on the page, the more exciting your character is going to be. And your idea will just continue to flourish throughout that. Now, if you're in the other realm of the block of the what's next, that you've written, and you're literally like, I don't know what to write next. I know. And you might be in the space of like, I know where I want the story to end. And I just wrote all this other stuff, but how am I going to get to the next bit? I use Scrivener when I write. And for anyone that's unfamiliar with Scrivener, the way the novel file is broken down, instead it's broken into little folders. And inside the folders, then you have like scene cards, which you can then write, your whole scene on. I have one of those folders, which should be a chapter of the book, entitled Empty the Trash Brain. I just opened up a new file, and that is where I go in and start typing. What the heck am I doing? I was at this scene. This is what happened with my protagonist. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I thought I was going to do this. I want her to get here. And it literally, I open this file whenever I'm at a point of what next? And I don't know what to write. And I have never spent more than, for this project, I would say, 5 minutes in there before I was already saying, oh, okay, all right, good. Now I know where to go. For some reason, if I sit back in my chair and try to think about what I want to do next, nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. It's kind of like my whole body is getting the message, oh, we don't have to write anymore. Her fingers are off the keyboard. We're done for today. But when I open the file of Empty the Trash Brain and my fingers are still typing, my brain and body is like, oh God, are we doing this? I mean, then let's just make it worth it. And all the ideas come flowing back, and I'm back into my writing. It comes back to that age-old adage that we say to writers all the time, that the muse doesn't look for someone who isn't writing, right? So if you want to get more ideas, if you want to be more inspired, if you want to really, get writing done, then you need to be writing. This is often advice given to writers who say, I'll write again when I'm inspired. I haven't come up with a good idea. The idea is show up, put your butt in the chair, write, and the muse will find you. This little weird file of mine, the Empty the Trash Brain file, is that for me, because there are often times that I'm in the middle of writing and everything's flowing and I finish up a scene and I'm like, okay, now how am I transitioning? What am I going to next? What's going to happen? And that could be a victim, that could be because I'm a pantser and not a plotter. I have a very sort of loose plot. Perhaps if you plot in a more detailed manner, you don't have that same sort of issue. But for me, it comes up, and that is my way through it. But there is another sort of what's next block that I think happens sometimes that I feel even plotters can't avoid. And sometimes if you are stuck in a space of, I don't know what to write next, and you feel like you cannot move forward in your story, it has been said that oftentimes writer's block comes up when the next thing that needs to be written is something that the writer is fearful of engaging with. So it could be a very difficult scene. It could be a very personal scene. It could be dealing with a trauma or some sort of something raw from your own life that even though you've fictionalized it, it is possibly triggering. In any of these cases, if you are writing a story that is challenging to you, you have got to give yourself some grace as you move forward through it. Now, if it's a thing that's difficult for you because it's possibly just like a personal issue that you're struggling with, and not necessarily in a traumatic way, but a thing that you're like struggling to even face in your own life, then I would say, like, muscle through. Give yourself the opportunity to write through this thing that you were brave enough to even bring into your story so that you can possibly work your way through it. However, if it's like truly raw and on this traumatic sort of spectrum, then I'm all for pacing it correctly. And I don't mean in terms of pacing the writing. That all comes later. You can look at your pacing and see if things work. I mean pacing yourself for how much you want to engage with this work in long strips of time. How long do you want to go into this traumatic state? I mean, because that's essentially what you're doing when you elect to write a story that taps into these really like raw and painful things. You are electing to re-engage with that emotional state that perhaps you've experienced before. But even if you haven't, like if you're writing a story about like a serial killer and, getting really into the intricacies of that kind of violence, and it's not something that you engage with, that could be, its own sort of stress on you. So when you're getting to a difficult scene or a difficult arc part of your story, really think carefully about how much time you're spending in that space and what you're doing for yourself when you come out of that space. So I'm often trying to remind people about various, aspects of self-care and being kind to ourselves and, being careful how we speak to ourselves. But I also talk a lot about how we empty our cup and then we fill it back up. Because as creatives, we're constantly like pouring out our cup. We're just pouring out all of our art into the world, whether it is our words or whatever creative thing that you're doing. That's a pouring out, even if you love it. Even if you love the process, you are still pouring out of yourself. So you got to find a way to pour back in. You got to fill your cup back up. And that could be any number of things. I've mentioned before that for me, it seems to come in the form of drawing, coloring, those types of things. I love to do them. It's not something that I feel like I'm doing in service to others, because it's sort of like I shut my brain off. I just do. I have fun. And when I'm done with it, I feel like I've filled my cup back up. And maybe I'll share the picture online or whatever, but I don't feel like compelled that like I have to share it and people are judging me on that, whatever. It's not a pouring out. It's for me. It could be some other creative outlet that you have. If you like to sing, if you like to crochet, but it could also, doesn't have to be creative. It could just be, another one for me is getting outside, walking in nature, being exposed to some other beautiful things. This is important for all of us while we're doing this massive undertaking of writing so quickly and so much, a constant pouring out of the cup, to weave these types of activities into our days and into our weeks to make sure that we are balancing the input and output of our creativity. But if you are engaging in a traumatic or raw or highly personal storyline that is not only pouring out your creativity cup, but also your emotional cup, then you have got to be thinking quite seriously about what you're doing to fill it back up. So, at first, the advice that I had given to some of the writers in my group that were dealing with this is like, make sure you give yourself some time away from your project and maybe, set a timer so you don't feel guilty about it. Like say, I'm going to do an hour of this other thing, but I'll come back to my writing. And that will be, so that you're not walking away too long. But one of the writers in my group actually said she was talking to somebody else, and they gave her the advice of timing how long she spent in the traumatic story. In fact, it was Sam Kimberly that gave the advice. So you guys all know Sam from the Artist Way group that I talk about, the book club, and she has these great accountability groups that she runs with various creatives. And one of the ladies in my group is also in one of her groups, and so she was talking about her story, and she said, you should really, think about how much time you're spending in the story. And I was like, boom, that's it. That's the answer. So for sure, if you are somebody in this position where you're dealing with something traumatic, I would echo that sentiment. Think about how much time you're spending in, and then I would underscore it with, make sure you're doing something to fill your cup back up. So if you're feeling blocked, and you are writing one of these stories, perhaps before you even get back to your work, think about something you can do for yourself to fill your cup up before you try to sit down and empty it out again. So there are countless other specific examples that we can talk about where story blocks can come up. And if you have a specific one that you'd like me to address or you have questions about, please feel free to reach out to me either on Facebook or Instagram. On Facebook, I'm just at Nicole Rivera, but you can find me through the Stop Writing Alone group or page and message me there. Or on Instagram, you can get me at Stop Writing Alone. But I do want to talk to you about the other aspects of our writing life that come into play, particularly when we're doing NaNoWriMo. And that is our regular personal lives and our work lives. And both of the blocks that sort of come up in both of these realms are either they're taking too much of our brain or they're taking too much of our time. So if we think about the workplace, you know what your work entails. You know how much it needs you to show up. You've probably planned for that and thought about that before November came. You said, okay, I got to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I will work around that in terms of when I'm going to do my writing, and it'll all be great. And you've done the math. If you've been planning, you've seen where you will be able to fit everything in. And now you're in November, and maybe your job is demanding more of your time. All of a sudden, some special project has come up, or someone got sick and you need to do overtime to cover for them. Whatever it is. In both cases of the work life and the personal life, if all of a sudden more of your time is being demanded in a way that you did not plan for, there's one solution. And I'm sorry, it's the same solution all the time. That is just sitting down with your schedule again and scheduling time where you can write. And I will reiterate what I said before. Be kind to yourself. Don't schedule yourself so that you are totally drained. Be realistic about what can be maintained and sustained, and how you will be able to show up for that time. But don't feel like this is now impossible because this isn't the November I planned for. This happens to us all the time, and this is the great challenge and beauty of NaNoWriMo, is that it does present these regular life challenges because it's a full 30 days of our life. Things change, and in the interim, we've got to find a way to get our writing in. Perhaps on the day that you need to do massive overtime, maybe you don't write at all. Maybe you're not going to be writing 7 days a week anymore if that was your plan. Maybe you have to stick to just writing on the weekends or, every other day or whatever it is. But just sit and schedule it. If, on the other hand, the workplace or your personal life is taking too much of your brain, so this is different, right? Because it could be that work's extra thing is just like, you just need me there more often, and that sucks, but whatever, I can just be there. But if it's a new work project that then requires you to be fully engaged for more hours of the day, and by the time you're done, you're finding, I scheduled the time to write, but I am just done. I'm done. I don't have anything else in me for this. Well, this goes back to what I was saying in the last bit about taking a break for yourself. If the scales have been tipped with, your mental output for either your workplace or your home space, a lot of parents right now are not just dealing with their workplace, but they're also dealing with the remote learning of it all. And that is a massive tipping of the scales for all the brain power that we have, because now we're juggling schedules inside the house and trying to help, maybe multiple kids get through their days with school and things like that. If you didn't really count on how intense that would be, and if you are showing up at the end of the night to do your writing and you're just like, what? if your what next is what? Because you are totally empty from your day, then you need to take a break. And what you have got to do, I think, is kind of schedule that in, time the break, because there is a scary thing with breaks in NaNoWriMo. It's kind of like that whole thing of me sitting back in my chair and not writing, that the whole body and brain and everything says, oh, great, we're not writing anymore. How relaxing for us. Let's keep doing this. So if you find that there's a rhythm of like, I sit down to write each weeknight and I got nothing, then try to either take a break each night when you would normally sit down and say, I am going to take a half hour to watch that show that I really love, that makes me laugh and makes me not think about anything. And then I'm going to come and sit down and write. And maybe your original plan was that you were going to write an hour every night, but now you'll just write a half hour every night. But the half hour of writing will be so much richer than that hour of what? That's just drained and not feeling it. But it also could be, like I was saying before, it might be that like weekdays ain't working. I need to go to bed. And then you figure that out and you move forward and you learn what is the writing life that's going to work for you. And as I said in previous works, the greatest gift that NaNoWriMo can give any of us is exactly that. Is figuring out what your writing life looks like. If your writing life ends up looking like, I can't do 50,000 words in 30 days, but I can do 25,000 words that I'm hella proud of, and then do the next 25,000 the next month and do that consistently, then you've won. You've totally won. Because all too often what happens is people come to week 2 of NaNoWriMo. They take a look at everything and they say, I can't do 50,000 words in 30 days. So I'm done. And I'll try again next November. And they don't come close to their projects or their writing for 12 months. Don't make this a everything or nothing endeavor. Let this be your education on the things that block you and how you can overcome them. Every single week, something new is going to come up, and you're going to look at them and say, what's a solution that I can work with on a long-term sort of basis? So that each time this thing comes up, it won't keep me from writing my story. And that is literally all this week is about. There will be blocks in your writing. There will be blocks in your personal life. There will be blocks in your work life. Things happen. None of these blocks are permanent. They're all mini educations. Every single one is asking you, are you committed to doing this for the long term? Because there's a way around this, but you've got to find it. So I hope that the little bit of advice that I gave you can help at least some of you get through those blocks. But I hope in a more global sense that everybody can get around this idea that, yeah, 50,000 words in a month would be awesome if you can get, but if you can't, and you come out of this month with a writing life that's sustainable for you, that is the huge win. Because I've done 50,000 words in 2 weeks. Like the first time I did NaNoWriMo, I was terrified of writing during Thanksgiving. So I nearly killed myself writing 50,000 words in 2 weeks. And that's not sustainable. It took me a really long time to sit down and try to write another novel because I was like, I can't do that. How else can I do it? I don't know how to write a novel within my real life. So I've spent every NaNoWriMo and Camp NaNoWriMo, and now in the Happy Campers Club, that's what I'm all about. I'm all about how do you make it sustainable. We set goals each week and we ask ourselves what worked, what didn't work, and then how do we tweak it? How do we tweak it? And everybody's coming out with a writing life that works for them. But this is the truest challenge for all of you. Everybody can do that this month. Don't give up on week 2. Whatever's blocking you, find your way around. And if I didn't address it in this podcast and you've got questions for me, please reach out because there is a way around it. You can do this, and I can't wait to read what you've written. So you've got to keep going. Guys, that is it for me this week. I'm going to get some more words in before I go to bed tonight. But I thank you, as always, for listening. And I hope you are having a wonderful month so far and that you are not letting all your blocks, big and small, get in your way of being the fantastic writer that I know you can be. Have a great week. Thanks again for listening. I will talk to you again next Thursday. But be sure to tune into the MV Rivera YouTube channel for a new writing prompt if you are still daring to try to do some short stories in the midst of all this. I did announce last week that more than likely those videos will be coming out on Saturday in November because trying to get them done on Fridays was just killing me with all of this writing. So Friday or Saturday, tune into NV Rivera YouTube to get your next writing prompt for the 52 Stories Challenge. And that could also be helpful to you if you are finding a block. You could take a prompt, apply it to your characters, and see what happens next. So, thanks again. Talk to you next week. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the Stop Writing Alone podcast wherever you're listening to this episode today. Then connect with us on Facebook at Stop Writing Alone Facebook page or in the Stop Writing Alone with Nicole Rivera Facebook group. Check Instagram or Twitter where I'm at NV_Rivera to find links to our email newsletter. Recording, hosting, editing, producing. It's so much work. Disaster has struck. I finished my coffee. Tell me coffee is coming. ko-fi.com/stop writing alone.